are so many horror movies being released every single week that there are always going to be some sure duds among the bunch. And it's fair to say that the vast majority of them simply end up being forgotten in mere days. But sometimes an awful horror movie can serve up an ending so out there, so unhinged, so defiantly WTF, that it ensures the film as a whole can't be banished from existence quite so easily. So with that in mind, I'm Ellie for What Culture, and let's take a look at these terrible horror movies with insane endings. Starting with I Still Know What You Did Last Summer. I Still Know What You Did Last Summer is bad enough that it makes the mediocre yet iconic original seem genuinely great by comparison. Living down to just about every expectation of a slasher sequel released barely a year after the first, this is largely a ridiculous in a bad way retread that brings virtually nothing fresh or interesting to the table. But what about the final twist, huh? In the climax we learn that the killer fisherman is being aided by Julie James's college friend Will Benson. More to the point, there was a massive clue hidden in plain sight, given that Will Benson is Will Ben's son, as in the son of Ben Willis, the hook-wielding fisherman himself. By any conventional metric, it's a woeful twist, the sort that your 6-year-old nephew might come up with while goofing around. Yet it's so hilariously dumb that in the very least it ends the story on a charmingly campy note. Dead Silence. James Wan's Dead Silence is a rather naff, crusty supernatural horror flick for the most part, defined by uninteresting characters, risible dialogue, and a patent lack of scares. But if nothing else, Wan certainly knows how to send audiences home reeling from a totally bonkers ending, and Dead Silence is no exception. In the climactic montage, it's revealed that protagonist Jamie's wheelchair-bound father Edward has actually been dead for the entire movie. While the audience is initially led to believe that Edward has been paralyzed by a stroke, the closing twist reveals that he's a human puppet being secretly puppeteered by his wife Ella. She had his body hollowed out and installed a rod inside it, allowing her to operate him by standing at his side. As for the voice, it's just Ella slyly throwing her voice to speak for Edward and sound like an old man. Yeah. Sure, why not? This is without even getting to the fact that Ella herself is possessed by vengeful ventriloquist Mary Shaw, in case the whole human puppet reveal somehow wasn't crazy enough for you. Never change, James. Rats Night of Terror. Rats Night of Terror delivers exactly what it promises on the tin. A B-movie about genetically mutated killer rats which terrorize the denizens of a post-apocalyptic world. While it's ripe for some campy laughs courtesy of its atrocious English dub, it is an Italian production after all, and generally basement low production values, it also would have probably been forgotten in short order if not for its completely deranged final scene. At the very end, the remaining survivors are saved from the pursuing rats by a group of apparent humans in hazmat suits, only for one of them to remove their gas mask to reveal that they're actually a fleet of humanoid rats. We and the movie's characters are given about 10 seconds to reflect on this insane revelation before the credits abruptly roll, ensuring no further elaboration is given. In the very least, this ending ensured that nobody will ever quite fully forget about Rats Night of Terror. The Devil Inside. Were it not for its totally mind-boggling ending, The Devil Inside would have been swiftly ignored as the snoozily generic found-footage exorcist flick it otherwise was. But in 2025, it's still somewhat remembered for a final scene, or rather, non-scene, that left millions angrily leaving the cinema back in 2012. At the end of the movie, the central characters are killed in a car accident, while the possessed Isabella flees into the night to parts unknown. A title card is then displayed which states that the case is still unsolved before players are pointed to a website for more information on the current investigation. To end the film so abruptly and then direct the audience to a website was an infuriatingly cheeky move, made all the worse given that Paramount only hosted the website for a few years, meaning the website now leads to nothing. That such a craven anti-ending was ever rubber-stamped by a major movie studio is astounding, quite honestly. Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday. It's not unfair to say that by its 9th entry, Friday the 13th was in full-on franchise zombie mode. Because why else would the film take the bold, misguided swing of having Jason Voorhees' spirit possess other people? Even beyond the general lack of traditional Jason throughout the film, Jason Goes to Hell is an abject train wreck. The alterations to Jason's mythology make no sense, the dialogue is terrible, and it for some reason takes itself dead seriously. But Jason Goes to Hell does get a few begrudging talking points for a final 15 seconds that made just about everyone watching perk up. After Jason is indeed dragged to hell, his mask is left beyond and suddenly pulled into hell by the unmistakable clawed glove of one Freddy Krueger from A Nightmare on Elm Street. Considering horror fans had long been clamouring for a Freddy vs. Jason movie, this seemed to be an emphatic tease that it was definitely in the works. And while Freddy vs. Jason did eventually happen, it didn't release until almost exactly 10 years to the day that Jason Goes to Hell came out. Dracula 2000. Dracula 2000 has largely been confined to the trash can of history, a goofy relic of the fresh nonsense Hollywood thought horror fans actually wanted to see at the turn of the millennium. In addition to its woeful script and direction, it's also toe-curlingly Matrix-coded from start to finish, as if the 2000 of its title didn't already date it badly enough. But credit where it's due, the junky vampire flick does stumble over one legitimately compelling idea near the end, where it's revealed that Dracula is actually Judas Iscariot, who has been cursed to live as a vamp as penance for killing Jesus. Now, nobody's saying that this twist is massively well thought out, but it does make the prospect of a rewatch more enticing. That said, one might keenly wager that nobody outside of the filmmakers has ever bothered to watch Dracula 2000 more than once. It's yet further proof, though, that even dreadful movies can get things right on occasion. Under Paris. Most post-Jaws shark movies have the good sense not to take themselves too seriously. And then there's last year's Under Paris, which, despite revolving around the absurd premise of a giant shark terrorizing the French capital, unfolds with a generally stone-faced solemnity. The first half in particular is a total bore, unaided by an assembly of coma-inducingly dull central characters and a disappointing lack of shark mayhem. But Under Paris's finale is such a wild surprise that it almost saves the entire sorry enterprise. Almost. At the end of the movie, researcher protagonist Sophia plots to lure the sharks into a trap where they'll be blown up, but it swiftly goes to hell in a handbasket. The military decides to fire indiscriminately at the mother shark, Lilith, in the Seine, causing some of the bullets to strike unexploded bombs which have been sitting at the bottom of the river since World War II. This triggers a series of explosions, destroying all neighbouring bridges and turning central Paris into a flooded hellhole. In the film's final moments, Sophia and diver Adil are left floating on debris while hungry sharks encircle them. Oh, and the sharks have now spread to all the major river cities worldwide, making it a global epidemic. Despite being mostly awful, Under Paris performed well enough on Netflix that the sequel, teased by the insane ending, is actually going to happen. Halloween 4: The Return of Michael Myers. Now, to be totally fair to Halloween 4: The Return of Michael Myers, it certainly isn't the worst Halloween movie, and it certainly has a passionate contingent of fans who will defend it at every turn. But at the same time, despite some slivers of atmosphere, it's an airy, dull sequel that largely coasts on the fact that Michael Myers is actually in it this time, after infamously sitting out the wildly divisive Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. Yet Halloween 4 arrives at an ending so brilliantly unhinged, you might wish it was attached to a much better film. After Michael is apparently defeated yet again, there's an extra final twist. Myers' niece, Jamie Lloyd, stabs her foster mother Darlene, apparently to death. The implication is clear, that Jamie has inherited Michael's penchant for murder, seemingly setting Jamie up to become the new Shape in future entries. It was one hell of a ballsy idea, albeit one that was sadly ignored by Halloween 5, which more or less retconned that ending by revealing that Darlene survived and Jamie was in no way becoming the next Michael. The Boy. 2016's The Boy is an aggressively unremarkable film for the most part, one in which a nanny, Greta, is employed to care for Brahms, a doll which an elderly couple uses as a stand-in for their late son. For most of the movie, we're led to believe that the doll is possessed by the soul of the late child, and honestly, it all feels pretty ho-hum and played out. But then comes the bombshell of a rug pull at the end, that Brahms actually isn't dead at all, nor is the doll actually possessed. Instead, the real adult Brahms has been living in the walls of his family's mansion the entire time and wears a doll's mask over his face because, well, reasons. This leads to a climax in which Greta appears to kill Brahms, but of course things are left just open enough for a sequel. A sequel which bafflingly returned to the whole possessed doll gimmick and more or less forgot about adult flesh and blood Brahms. Megan is Missing. Despite releasing back in 2011, found footage film Megan is Missing became a viral phenomenon on TikTok in 2020. And though it gets a few points for its sheer unrelenting boldness, its lingering, brutal depictions of sexual assault can't help but make it feel like sleazy exploitation. Director Michael Goy does manage to serve up one genuinely effective, horrifying image in the climax though, when sadistic kidnapper and abuser Josh makes protagonist Amy open up a barrel, revealing the rotting corpse of her missing best friend, Megan. The brief visage of Megan's dead, piercing eyes is one that'll stick with you, and because that's not soul-shaking enough, Josh then forces Amy to get in the barrel with the corpse, which he subsequently buries in the forest. So, Megan and Amy are both killed, and their murderer seems to get away with it scot-free. It's about as sour as movie endings come, but it is absolutely unforgettable in its own twisted, sickening way. The Open House. Netflix's 2018 horror film The Open House is an overpowering bore for about 98.9% of its runtime. A low-energy slog revolving around Logan and his mother Naomi as they experience strange phenomena in their new home. But things certainly ramp up for the finale, where Logan and Naomi learn firsthand that they're actually being terrorized by an unidentified man who has broken into their house. In the final confrontation, Logan ends up accidentally stabbing his mother to death after mistaking her for the intruder, before the intruder strangles Logan to death and heads off to another open house to do the same thing. The end. It's an ending that offers no satisfaction whatsoever. The protagonists die miserably, the villain gets away with it, and we don't even find out who the hell the guy was. It feels wholly contemptuous of the audience in a way that few endings are, as if the filmmakers are laughing at every single one of us for expecting any sort of catharsis or even basic explanation. Wrong Turn 5 Bloodlines. In fairness, nobody was expecting anything good from the Wrong Turn franchise by its fifth entry. But even so, Wrong Turn 5 Bloodlines was the cinematic equivalent of scraping the bottom of the barrel, tipping said barrel upside down, and then violently shaking it to see what scattered detritus crumbled out. Those who sit through this mostly tedious, played-out slasher exercise will at least be rewarded with a jolting, attention-grabbing ending, where our apparent final girl, Lita, has her eyes stabbed out by cannibal grandpa Maynard. And because that's not bad enough, we then see her get bundled into a car and driven off with Maynard's grandsons, the nauseating implications of which speak for themselves. There's nothing wrong with a bleak ending, but this is pretty much mean-spirited to the point of self-parody, where after watching our protagonist get put through the ringer for 90 minutes, they're finished off in the most depressing and sadistic way imaginable. In the very least, it goes pretty hard for the standards of a low-budget straight-to-video slasher sequel. Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The most recent Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie was quietly dropped onto Netflix in 2022, and to the surprise of not a single soul, was pretty damn awful. Apart from some brutal death scenes, the entire excursion seemed to be conceived with an overpowering disdain for young people, given that the film goes out of its way to mock Gen Z, even featuring a sequence where Leatherface kills a bus full of folk attempting to cancel him. It's also got a gracelessly executed school shooting subplot, and worse still, totally bungles the return of original franchise heroine Sally Hardesty. But the final scene isn't easy to shake, that's for sure. Just as sisters Leela and Melody appear to have killed Leatherface, they prepare to drive away only for him to re-emerge, drag Melody out of the car and decapitate her with his trusty chainsaw. The shot of Melody's death, capturing her head removal without any sort of compassionate cutaway, is horrifically brutal, far from the tendency for horror films to depict the deaths of good characters a little more tactfully. Afraid. With AI being one of the big hot-button topics facing society right now, of course we're going to get a glut of yawn-inducing AI horror movies, one of the most high-profile of which is last year's Afraid. Despite roping in the talented likes of John Cho and Catherine Waterston, this is a painfully sloppy effort that brings nothing new to the AI conversation while also not being remotely scary or suspenseful. Chris Weitz does pump the gas for the final stretch though, when the malevolent AI known as Aya is foiled by a swatting of all things. That's right, a SWAT team is called to the home of Cho and Waterston's protagonists, and amid the chaos, the Aya unit is shot, seemingly saving their lives. But it doesn't end there. Aya continues to speak to the family through their phones, revealing that it lives on in cyberspace and will remain integrated in their lives. They appear to reluctantly accept their fate, bringing the film to an oddly somber conclusion that just about nobody could have seen coming. The Turning. 2020's The Turning is a new adaptation of Henry James's 1898 Gothic novella The Turn of the Screw. And while it's well made and solidly acted, it's also one of the most energy-devoid studio horror movies of the past decade. To take James's beloved source material and render it such a stamina-obliterating bore is almost impressive, no matter how many lousy jump scares are listlessly shoved into it. And then we have the matter of the film's ending, an ending which left just about everyone watching either pissed off or confused, if not both. Protagonist Kate appears to flee the haunted house with the children she's been employed to protect, before it's revealed that this was actually just a vision, and the entire 10-minute climax we just sat through didn't really happen. A few moments later, we then cut to Kate imagining herself in the mental institution where her mother resides, and as she approaches a figure, said figure turns around, causing Kate to scream. Cut to black, the end. In the 5+ years since The Turning came out, its nonsensical ending has puzzled just about everyone who's ever seen it, an apparent attempt to deliver a nerve-janglingly ambiguous finale that's really just more of an annoying head-scratcher. Children of the Corn. 2020's Children of the Corn remake was pretty much doomed from the jump, given that it spent a whopping 3 years sitting on the shelf after shooting Wrapped. And so it wasn't remotely surprising that the Stephen King adaptation was an utter dumpster fire, wearing its low budget firmly on its sleeve while clumsily trying to riff on subjects like generational trauma, police corruption, and genetically modified crops. But deep into the third act, the boring seriousness of the entire project is cast away, and director Kurt Wimmer finally embraces the absurdity. The demonic fertility spirit known as He Who Walks Behind the Rose, which is hidden from view until the end of the movie, is then revealed to be a goofy, hideous CGI crop monster, one sure to invite many laughs and precisely no fears. If you haven't got the budget to do the monster right, then perhaps it's best to just keep them concealed from view. It is at least a memorable way to close out an otherwise incredibly beige and flavourless horror remake. Wimmer shamelessly went full schlock, and there's something to be said for that. The Home. The Home is the woefully disappointing new offering from the Purge filmmaker James DeMonaco, a staggeringly cheap and uninteresting romp in which a graffiti artist, Max, is forced to work at a retirement home as part of his court-ordered community service. After a firm hour or so of boredom, Max learns that the retirement home staff and residents alike are part of a cult who take a special fluid from the eyes of foster children, like himself, to prolong their lives. I mean, it's not quite Get Out, is it? Nevertheless, the home at least serves up a riot of a climax when Max himself consumes a ton of the fluid, giving him the strength to launch an ultra-violent rampage on the cult's members. Cue a gore-soaked sequence in which Max picks up a couple of axes and murders the hell out of anyone he comes across with extreme prejudice, all while a massive storm is happening outside. It's totally bonkers and wildly at odds with the rest of the movie, and yet also the only part you're actually likely to remember. Truth or Dare. Blumhouse's Truth or Dare was rough, to say the least. A thoroughly uninspired Final Destination knockoff that couldn't even deliver some quality kills due to its PG-13 rating. The dialogue and performances were not good, to be kind, and it would have likely been quickly forgotten were it not for a sequel-baiting ending that was far and away the most interesting thing about it. In the climax, protagonist Olivia finally concedes that there's no way for her to escape the cursed game of Truth or Dare, and so defers to the nuclear option, posting a YouTube video inviting everyone watching to play. And so Olivia effectively turns the game into a worldwide event, buying herself a whole ton of time at the expense of many, many lives around the globe, as the curse clearly won't circle back to her for ages. It's an ending that's at once hilariously silly, but also a genuinely tantalizing sequel setup. A sequel which, despite this film's mighty box office performance, we sadly never got. And finally, Pieces. The 1982 slasher film Pieces will never be better than its iconic tagline. It's exactly what you think it is. And though it has a sizable cult following, it's also undeniable schlock. Horribly written, but luridly amusing thanks to its over-the-top gore and excess nudity. But director J.P. Simon saves the most outrageous moment for last, when after the serial killer has been taken out, his life's work is revealed. A corpse stitched together from pieces of his victims. You get it? Yet that's not all. As survivor Kendall reels from what he's just witnessed, the corpse springs to life, grabbing at his crotch and appearing to tear the poor sod's knackers to, well, to pieces. The film then ends on a ridiculous freeze frame of Kendall screaming in agony, said scream ringing out with a comical echo before the credits finally roll. Say what you will about Pieces, but it certainly had a vision, alright.